Hey, it's Warren Whitlock here with another distributed conversation. That other person you see is Mitchell Levy. Let's get to him in a moment. I'll tell you why I've invited Mitchell on first. We'll talk more about who he is in a second. This is Distributed Conversations. We have conversations talking about the future, technology, and how the world's going to be more distributed rather than centralized. I don't know what you know about decentralized versus centralized, but boy, anything that can be distributed is better. We don't want a top-down, one person in charge of the world telling the rest of us what to do. We all want these things to act in individual locations and also allow us to be collective, collaborate, and do and come up with better and better things. So for a better life, we need the technology. So we've been talking a lot about relationship management, the future of how we're going to be able to get along together, and the things that humans do well that basically technology doesn't care about. The smartest AI in the world is still not going to have much of a personality other than a manufactured personality. Real human to human contact becomes more and more important in this age. So I went to the source, the guy for things like reputation and purpose, clarity. And I've done this. I've had sessions where I talked to my friend Mitchell Levy and said, "What are you doing now?" And I thought he was publishing some books. And then one day he told me, "No, what I'm doing now is I'm helping people with their purpose and clarity." And he said, "You want to do it?" And we had a 15-minute session, and I had a clear idea of where I was going. I recommended, if you get the chance, today we're going to not fix Warren, we're going to fix the whole world. So welcome to the show, Mitchell.
That's a big tall order, but great to be
Yeah,
here.
but
Thanks.
we're two guys that have got some moxie. We're going to take on the entire world. I'm hearing a lot about this idea that some of us don't need to focus on technology killing us all. That it's possible that in a future where there is a 99.999% chance of good coming and a 0.0001 chance of the AI rising up and killing us all, perhaps we don't need everybody working on the security. And so let's assume somebody is and drop that for today and think about what's coming up better for tomorrow. Is it going to be, I think I came up with this a few minutes ago thinking about it. I said, it seems like if we're looking for good to come, then we ought to be looking for how can it help? Does this mean I don't have to worry about my reputation, that everybody's going to be dealing with my avatars and I can blame it on technology and get away with anything? Or is the human to human contact truly more important?
So to answer your question directly, but then I'll go into more detail. It is becoming more and more important that we talk to a human, whether we're physically talking to them or even a Zoom talking to them. The absolute amazing part about AI is that you could feed it in all of your life work or the life work you want to feed it in. And you could say, now interpret this for me going forward compared to many other things. And it will, here's the cool part, Warren. This is what happens when you get older, you forget stuff. Guess what? The AI doesn't really forget stuff. We're ignoring hallucination or anything else. So the benefit to you as a service provider, the benefit to you as someone who's out there serving others is you can absolutely create an AI that will be able to interpret things based on the way you look at the world. All right, good news. Here's the bad news. And that is those people are told, well, that's how I'm going to run my business. I'm going to let AI do it. Well, that is not the right answer. The answer is the most important thing you can do, the most important thing that you could focus on if you're a professional service provider is that one-on-one conversation. And so getting to that point where now using AI, using opportunities to bring people in a room, but getting somebody to actually, if you could get AI to do everything else and you did nothing more than have one-on-one calls with the right people during the day, man, that would be a great business. That's what I do when I work with others.
That's exactly the way to put it, because I know the number of times I've run into you We've done a few things where we set up to talk, but for most of the time, it's running into you at this event or another. And it doesn't matter where it is, I come off better for it. I feel like that, and especially when there's no agenda. We were talking before the recording about meeting up someplace where we met in Las Vegas, and everything. But we're doing this today because I suggested it when we got together, as you were passing by, rushing to go someplace, and you were kind enough to stop and say hello to the old man sitting in a chair, wanting to get up and look at the trade show. And I was there talking to somebody else who was in a similar situation. We were resting our bodies instead of walking around. And up comes, bright as can be. I'd call you perky if you weren't an old man. If you had a teenage daughter, if you were a teenage daughter, she's perky. That's what it is. And so, yeah, just that personality. But it's somebody I'm always looking forward to talk to, but I really didn't know why. I said, you ought to come, we ought to do a podcast. And then we kind of structured some ideas about what to talk about between then and now. But for the most part, what I knew would happen today is we'd have a good conversation. And I really liked chatting with Claude AI. And today I heard on a podcast about some guys in tech or venture capital, something like that, talking about I have a meeting and they leave ChatGPT audio mode on the phone. And so they were having three men were having a meeting and there's an extra person there, ChatGPT. Now, my experience using it on the phone is I turn it on and it's going through my headphones and I'm having trouble getting the word that I want to ask right, get the question right. And about then my wife walks into the room and that's a three-way conversation that makes no sense at all because she's asking, why am I saying to shut up? And I'm trying to turn off the thing. So we're still learning about that. But the difference is 2 years ago, I sat down with ChatGPT. That was the first, and then went into Claude. I mean, I've been using LLMs since they were 6, 7 years ago, and horrible copywriters, but could help you in some kind of writing. And then, of course, all the things that correct your writing and help you with that. And then when ChatGPT came out, I go, this is great. But I didn't get into just talking to it until Claude came out. And then I was talking to Claude. And at the end of a half hour, I felt like I'd learned something. And it seemed like most of the time I was telling Claude where I was wrong about hallucination. So, and I have the hallucination and I say, no, you got it wrong. Also, it's programming. I was asking about something that I thought was an objective fact, but it had been programmed by people with a little bit different view of the world. And it wasn't quite politics, but it was just kind of like how to look at something. And so I said, no, there's a difference. And I ended up asking the question, what's the difference between propaganda and persuasion? And there's baggage on the word propaganda, but how different is it?
That's a great question.
Yeah. And I only thought of that after talking to Claude for 10 minutes, trying to do something else. And then we got into that and we got into the history, Edward Bernays' writing, because he wrote a book on propaganda, which was later used by the Nazis, gave the word a bad name. And so Claude was able to discuss that with me. And I left with number one, that thing I just said to you, propaganda versus persuasion, which we could talk about all day. It was another topic, but I stopped there, went on to the next project. Now I find Claude still nice. I like the colors they use on the website, a little bit off-white, whatever the font is. Everything about it just seems to be a little bit upgrade from talking to ChatGPT. I use Perplexity all the time instead of a search engine. And I find that it gives me a lot more information than I wanted. And sometimes the answer 6 different ways. But when I just went there to ask for where a website was. So it's got a little bit going, but now it's been 2 years later. And it's so ingrained into what I do that I just have casual conversations and they make sense. But I know that it gets me nowhere if I don't go ahead and have a conversation with a friend. So,
Warren, as it comes down to when you're looking at content from AI, it's important to be discerning. right? So having experience, having done things yourself, when you hear back from Claude, it tells you there's no difference or there's a warped difference between those two words you used. That's
Yeah,
you using discernment,
right.
right? So what we need when you are in a vacuum talking to any AI is what discernment do you have on the data? When you're looking and talking with somebody, if I want to buy something from a company, I may use AI to do some research. I may use some AI to learn. And at some point in time, I want to talk to a human and verify that what I'm hearing is going to work. If I'm doing a professional service provider, I might use AI to say, hey, compare these 10, but let me have the 3 I need to talk to. Because at the end of the day, it's about the vibe. It's being
Yeah,
able to see that the person you're working with and feel the energy, that they have the intent and commitment to do the right thing, that they're servant leaders, that they're focused on doing the right thing by you, not the right thing by them. AI is
right.
not going to help you understand that. The human
I
to human
think,
contact will.
yeah, I think the help with writing thing that is touted all the time is coming along really nice. I've got the newsletter every week. I get a newsletter from Chris Brogan, and he puts out an excellent newsletter, chrisbrogan.com. Follow this guy, he's great. I started writing to him when he was somebody I kind of knew. I'd met. We'd had a couple of conversations. We'd even been to dinner together once where we were on opposite ends of the table of 8 people having dinner. So I sort of talked to him, but I didn't know him that well. I sought out the next time I saw him, I wanted to hang with him because Chris Brogan is a delightful guy to hang out with. So I got his newsletter and I said, well, he's saying hit reply and tell me. And it was a silly thing. It was a request of here's what I'm drinking right now. And some client's coffee or cup, or I don't even know what it was. I didn't have any interest in the paragraph that he started every newsletter with. But I just started hitting reply and say, well, I'm drinking water. It's all I drink. And then why, and maybe something else about that, and some joke about something he was writing about. And pretty soon it got to be friends. Well, Chris Brogan's parents live in Las Vegas. And whenever he has occasion to be in Las Vegas to see them or to speak on a stage here or whatever, he looks me up and says, this is like my number one thing I have to do when I come to Las Vegas now. We're that good of friends now. It's taken 10, 15 years to get there. I met him 20 years ago now. I've had him on podcast and we've done a few little things together, not anything that was anywhere near business. I tried that and it just didn't work. You're my friend. Hey, you want to get in on this deal we're doing with multi authors in a book, or you want to work on this project? Nope, nope. Will you come on my podcast? Yeah, sure. That sounds like fun. And, and it developed a human relationship, which I think is so profitable that I can't begin to measure it. Now, we did use email. We have used Zoom. We talked on social media. It wasn't that much face to face until it became necessary to be face to face because we're friends. And I think that's kind of like what we look at technology to do. I'm confused when people tell me that they feel distanced by using social media. Use the technology to get to what you want, not the other way around. Because maybe Zuckerberg likes that I spend more time on Facebook. Well, I assume he does. But, I think his idea of the social network and ultimately the idea of selling ads on that, first of all, I understand he had to take his maybe only 6 week vacation when they brought ads in so that Cheryl could come in and put ads in without him bucking the system and shutting down whatever she did. He hired her to do that. So this guy is not a pro advertising guy to begin with. And I just recently saw an interview with the grown-up Zuckerberg. When there wasn't too much to make fun of. Yeah, sure, he's had a makeover and and other things. It was on Joe Rogan, and it was a 3-hour interview. I didn't make it much into the second hour because he started talking about MMA fighting. Even there, I could feel those two getting together. This was the real Mark Zuckerberg we were hearing from. And he wasn't the bad guy that he gets depicted to be. And he wasn't the best technologist of ever. His idea of the future is not what I think is going to happen. That's not the point. The point is he is a real human being. There have been a few times on stage where I didn't think he was a human being, but yes, I can attest that I now feel he's a human being. It's the same with the other ones. Silly Elon dancing on stage with his arms going off in directions that looks like he's saluting Hitler, and silly things like that. All aside, this is the idiot who carried a sink into Twitter and thought it was funny. I never did get that joke. So, so I guess the joke never sank in with me. So, and he was on Saturday Night Live, which I loved watching, and I felt nervous for him the whole time. This is not a normal human being, but isn't that who we want to learn from? I'm sure if Elon wanted to come on the podcast, you'd understand if I bumped you. What a fascinating person. What a rare idea would be to get to talk to him. I want to meet those people. I want to commune and get more out of it. And isn't that what it's all about? What do we do? What do we do with the AI? Is it going to help us or is it going to replace us?
So if you, by the way, are able to provide an audience, the bigger the audience you can provide, the easier it is to get other people. The reason why Rogan can get Zuckerberg is simply because he's got the audience, right? So
absolutely.
Will AI replace us? Well, it depends who us is.
Yeah.
There are many jobs that are going away because they're not needed anymore. On the other hand, the jobs that are needed are those that involve some form of discernment on the content that's being produced. The other thing is, to answer your question, in the long term, yes, we disappear. You've seen the movie before, and the movie is very simple. As humans go out of their way to do the types of things that will continue to destruct the earth, when we create a entity that is superior to humans, the number one entity on the planet always does a good job of eliminating the number two entity that's causing a problem. Just think about what humans have done to the planet. And now think about if we create an entity that's more powerful. Now, is that
presumes that at some point the AI will be conscious and have desires and wants?
Well, it's even if it doesn't have desire and wants, it is being programmed to protect humans. Even if you think about Isaac Asimov's 3 rules: protect humans, I think it's no harm to humans, protect humans. Can't remember the third one, but I should probably have clouded that before I said it. The thing is, at some point in time, there's the thing that's interesting is when the requirement to eliminate, remember Thanos in that world order, eliminating half the population because the resources didn't support it. When you have an entity that is powerful enough to do that, then it comes down to, well, what is it that we need to do?
That's interesting.
But that's in the future, right?
Yeah.
In the current.
And I have an opposing view, but what you're saying is so logical and rational that I'm letting you say it. So, I have the view that a smart enough entity will see the trouble we make and realize that our overpopulation problem is not really overpopulation. Hey, didn't that guy Ehrlich say we were going to run out of resources and be done by 1990? Yeah, I saw that. I read his book in 1970. I remember the first Earth Day.
Let me go through Asimov's 3 rules. Number 1, a robot may not harm a human being or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm. Number 2, robot must obey the orders given it by human beings, except where such orders would conflict with the first law. Now, here's the interesting one. Robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second law.
Right.
Right. So what's interesting,
which is a high mark for becoming human, because we all of our civilization, literature, culture for forever is sacrifice for someone else is like the highest form of a human.
So
up to sacrificing your life.
it's one of the 10 values of being credible is being a servant leader, right? If you
Right.
are a service to others, right? And so I think it was interesting. I think the reason you originally invited me on is when I was at Comdex speaking in the year 1999 and 2000, I predicted and did a presentation at probably 50 times on business in the year 2025. And we are really close. I was shocked at how close we are. And so then you said, Mitchell, what's business in the year 2050 look like? And I'd rather talk about what does business look like today or a year from now. And we'll just
Yeah.
say for those people who are in business today that are not utilizing the benefit of AI, it's sort of like in the old days, if you're really old, those people who didn't use fax machines, those people who didn't use computers, those people who didn't have a website, those people like you keep filling in the blank. It's now for those entities, industries that are not using AI, someone in a garage is going to come along and completely come in with a new business model, new structure, different price points, and put you out of business. And so for those who were interested in
Yeah.
being successful, you got to use AI and you've got to
It,
use it in a way that's positive for you.
it goes back far, every technology there is. There's the Aristotle thought pencils were bad, or was that Socrates? I don't know, one of those guys back there. Pencils was going to ruin everything because if you didn't learn it and have it in your brain, you took a note, that was going to ruin your brain. And speeding trains at 30 miles an hour were going to be too rough. And at first, they only let men ride the train because women were too fragile. That boggles the mind of how they would think that. But because, when the train gets moving, you're not subject to those forces. You're going 30 miles an hour. You're sitting still. Yeah. But obviously they were worried about wrecks and things like that. A week or two ago, I do frequent polls on Twitter because I think I have a mostly technically literate audience, and they are coming to me to see me talk about emerging technologies and the future. So I ask about using robo taxis or a drive autonomous vehicle. I ask about how anxious somebody was get in, wait and see right away, the minute I can get in one. And then the third, I usually try to put the last answer to be somewhat of the prepared for the people that are just going to answer anything sarcastically and then leave a comment. Because, those are my people. And but this one, I'm now finding out that a lot of people actually feel this way on these things. This one, it was no, I'll never get into a robotaxi. That was 53% of the respondents that day.
That
Not
won't last. That won't
scientific.
last for long. Just to be clear, that won't last for long, and
Oh,
it
of
won't
course not.
last. And each generation has a different perspective.
So
Um,
you and I know the stats that a human driver in a Tesla it will go twice as far without an accident as a non-Tesla. The average for all cars is 195,000 miles without an accident. It's 425 for a Tesla. A Tesla with automated driving on is 2 million miles, or 10 times what other taxis would have, and very safe. And I had somebody decide to take me a task and answered, and I give them these stats, and we talk back and forth. Well, there's no way I'll never get into a Tesla. It could kill me. So then she decides to really prove it to me by showing me two news items. One was a video showing that someone ran into a truck and it went a different direction, causing a woman to jump into traffic to get hit by a Tesla. So the Tesla had nothing to do with her. Any car in that position would have hit the woman. And she died, and that's a horrible tragedy. I'm laughing, but at the same time, it's a horrible tragedy that any person died in that situation. But we don't solve it by getting rid of driverless cars. In fact, it makes a case for just the opposite, because a human driver caused that accident. But I did all of that, and she wasn't convinced because she just wasn't ready to be convinced. Now, when you get a chance to get in an Uber, by the way, getting in an Uber with or without an autonomous self-driving, not much different. You're sitting in the back and you can't prevent any accidents back there. So anybody that gets in a car, they're not driving themselves, doesn't have that illusion of control that it's going to get you in trouble. So I think a lot of it is communicating this stuff to people. And I often say this about everything since I started selling computer, was actually even when I was buying computers. I would say that a computer was probably worth $10,000 a year. It would pay for itself in 1 year, because computer and PC and software, about 10 grand back then in the early 80s. And every one of them would help a worker get 3 times as much work done. And sure enough, our productivity has shot up since we had that internet even more. But people aren't ready for that. And I look at my favorite is a dry cleaner. I had a friend running a dry cleaning business. I've had a couple of friends in life running a dry cleaning business. One named Warren, on my way home from my office, would stop by to talk to him and chat with him. And it wasn't about the clothes. We were friends at that point. And not about that he had technology to serve me. No, it was like, what does this guy think about technology? Well, he was listening to right-wing talk radio in the back, smelling dry cleaning fluids. I think he was going crazy. Meanwhile, he wasn't using any technology.
Warren, I was thinking about the AI, right? The AI in association with autonomous vehicles. I'm not convinced I know where autonomous vehicles are. You always hear this story, the one-off Waymo story, where a Waymo vehicle was driving around in circles and wouldn't let the person out, right? But I'll tell you about the good side. What cars now, because technology has gotten so much more powerful and so much more condensed, cars have sensors, cars have AI, cars have a lot more technology in them. That one of the movies I saw recently is some woman wanted to commit suicide, got in her car and ran towards a wall, but the car wouldn't let it. Right. And so it's interesting. I think, generally speaking, the best way to think about AI is not an either or, not an on or off, not a 1 or 0, but rather a augment. How can you augment what you do? As a book publisher, we've published over 750 books. The thing is, we used to always hire a content editor. And the content editor would go in and do a sometimes good job, sometimes bad job. It really depends. Sometimes would take long, sometimes not. Nowadays, I just need to take and create a special GPT bot for the book and say, hey, please do a content edit of this from the perspective of the author wanting to, and then fill in the blank, ABC, wanting to do the following. Mm-hmm. And the ability for AI to digest this level of content and generate a response and in the time, like I can now get a content edit done in less than a half hour, build the bot, ask for the content edit, less than a half hour. Whereas it would take days or sometimes weeks to get a content edit in the past. So what am I going to do? Of course, I'm going to build a bot for the book and do a content edit, and it's absolutely powerful. That needs to be.
We all get the advantage of working with you and your experience with whatever team you have. We don't care that some of it's a bot, and you get to help a lot more people.
Well, that's where it comes to powerful. For me personally, our team will deploy discernment before sharing the results, right? That's important. Right. Like, does this make sense? Does this not make sense? I remember recently walking through with an author. Hey, listen, we had AI do this. We will require you to spend another 3 months, or we can ignore this idea and just publish as is, right? And so that is augmenting the human with the AI.
Right. But powerful. Could a guy on Fiverr come up with that same advice? Yes. Would he be believed? Not as much as getting it from Mitchell.
That's where it comes down to your first question: reputation and the ability for people to trust, know, and like you. It is harder to get to trust, know, and like AI. It's not impossible, And we've seen many people try it. That fake news broadcaster, who's
Yeah.
made to be looking like an unhuman human, right?
Yeah. You know, the minute you see it, that this is not a human. Same as with clip art. When they put clip art on, our friend Dennis Yu preaches that never, ever does he allow his VAs to use clip art on anything. You got to find original pictures. He has the client supply more pictures, or he flies out and takes pictures of his client
Oh,
to
nice.
make sure that it's all human, real people. I think there's some tricks to make that not. Sometimes it's not that important that the human face you see with a smile is one you took the picture yourself. But AI has made that so we don't have to. But we can make things that are original, interesting, and get the right kind of attention. Putting clip art on your website is not really what the problem is. The problem is it going to deliver a message? And as you say, the clarity of that message. And so, what percentage of people could use a better reputation and clarity?
Oh. The majority of the
What's
population.
it? Let's look at the total addressable market here. What's your TAM?
Dude, telling you what, I did something really interesting for those who I'm going to put this on the screen. This is a picture of Warren Whitlock, AI generated, talking about AI in a podcast. I just thought I'd share that. This is way too funny.
Yeah.
So when I ended up doing a Napoleon Hill style research, I interviewed 500 thought leaders on credibility. One of the things that came out of that research is that 98% of the thought leaders do not have clarity. So the thing that's interesting, if you don't have clarity, how do people see you? And how do they actually truly get to trust you and know you, right? How do they get to like you, right? And so
Yeah.
what percent of people can have a better reputation? You could almost say 98%. I mean, a large percentage of people, it is really hard when you look at their websites, you look at their social media, you look at their LinkedIn, and you're like, what does this person do again? Hard to tell. And so what is the reputation when somebody says something where they're in front of you, but when you go and look at how they look online and it's something different? That's the next question to be asking AI is, hey, do you know Warren Whitlock in all forms that Warren shows up? What does Warren stand for? And how can Warren update his reputation? I'll bet you AI can answer that question today, although I'll bet you there's also a lot of hallucination in it.
There's still some there. Yeah. I definitely had a problem when that came up. I've always had trouble getting a Wikipedia entry. And none of the stuff I've done have really quite to that level where major media can tell about it. I have a certified best-selling book, but that wasn't enough by itself. What have you done for me lately? Was that best-selling book from one of the big name New York City publishers? No, it was from a little company called Zeno Press that I formed when I was helping other people get their books published. That Zeno Press has not got that great of a reputation by itself. It's helped the reputation of many others, but that's what it knows. And so I guess the question is, should we be looking at what we're going to do to boost the reputation of somebody for 2025 and beyond? And you've already told us the first step. You've got to get clarity about what your purpose is.
It's funny. I'm going to use the word purpose. I'm going to use it slightly different than the way most people use it, right? So when people say, what's your purpose? Sometimes that's such an amorphous question, such an amorphous concept. What I'm going to say is what I can do, I could sit with any human, any company, and help them articulate where they are executing on their purpose. So that's different. It's sort of like, Warren, the best way I can equate this as a fellow publisher, I'd often run across somebody who would want to publish their book, their best book that's going to cover everything they've ever learned in life. And because they were so busy, they would never publish it. So what I'd also often tell that person, hey, let's do the second book first. Let's do the book that way we can get out in 3 to 6 months. It'll focus on this topic, whether it's a collaboration book or something else. Let's do that first. they'd say, okay. And then they go, well, maybe I don't need the bigger book. I'm going to say the same thing on purpose.
Hmm.
Purpose is one of those things that we're going to go through life continually focusing on what is my purpose. I can't tell you, I can tell you exactly what that is. What I can tell you with 100% certainty, I've done this over 1,000 times. I can help somebody articulate where they're executing on their purpose. And
Hmm.
when you have that in something less than 10 words, which is really where I spend my time, when
Hmm.
you can do that, I call it, just so we have the word here, it's called a CPOP, your customer point of possibilities. If you can do
Right.
that, now you can then say to whether you're using AI, you could train Claude, you could train ChatGPT, you could say, hey, listen, this is my CPOP. This is how I show up in the world, less than 10 words. Now let's take a look at my other pieces of social media. Take a look at my website. Tell me what I need to update. Take a look at this book. Where is it inconsistent? That's a great way to use AI.
Oh, I'm going to have to ask Claude, what is Mitchell Levy's pop? And see if it
Yeah,
comes back. It'll probably give me an explanation of what you define as it, but what is his personal, and see what it has to say. And I'll bet
I'm
it's in there
curious now.
someplace. Yeah. And well, I find that I'm pretty good at helping other people sorting through their purpose. But yeah, if you ask me what I'm doing, it's like I want to put the word enigma on a business card. And so, if I need to define what I am, it's an enigma. I'm not sure myself. And, cobbler's kids getting shoes. And I think we all feel like that somewhat. But I think that puts me in the 2% rather than the 98%. And even those of us who have a purpose have that problem. So, such a huge number needing that. It reminds me of what we learned from digital twin. I'm sure you know a bit about our twin protocol. Something that started with the day I met Ben Goertzel, the father of the Sophia robot, or one of the fathers. One built the robotics, and one is the guy who would define AGI as artificial general intelligence. We didn't have the G until a 2005 book by Dr. Ben Goertzel, and so I had a chance to meet him and a guy raising some money for one of the startups under this technology. And so I made an effort to get to LA and be there for this little meeting, saw the presentation and whatnot. And my deal was I was getting a ride to the airport out of it. And my friend said, well, I have to have a meeting with Ben first. And I said, okay, I'll wait around. I actually had a friend in the audience who was going to take me to lunch. I had the lunch all taken care of. And so we'll just meet back here at 2 o'clock. And before I could say that, he says, well, you could just come with us. So I had hamburgers in Manhattan Beach outside on a nice day. It was a wonderful experience. And halfway through the conversation, after he told me something about what he did, I used the thing I've used a million times before, which is the digital banker's box. It's when you got to put all of your writings, everything you do, what you're going to take out when you're in a fire, or what you're going to leave the office with when you're done, just that important stuff. And not all of it's lava lamps. Some of it's actually white papers and materials you've written, manuscripts of your book and whatnot. Well, I go back to the pre-digital age when that amounted to something. Now it's pretty much you could fit that on a thumb drive. It's probably available on the cloud through your phone. You don't really need to pack it. So I gave him that idea and I said, what if you could spin up an AI? I don't care much for your robot. I actually said that to Ben Goertzel the day I met him. I later found out that it's a partnership. The partner does the robotics. He's the AI genius. I lucked out and didn't say it to the wrong partner. And he said, yeah, I could spin up something like that in about 3 months. 2021, how many people could say they could build their own AI? Very few. He did it. Next time I saw him, he said, well, it works not quite as good as Siri. We're still working on it. It had been 3 months.
Amazing.
So I started following it. They formed a company. It's Twin Protocol, and we're heavy into digital twins. Sorry, I don't think this series of podcasts has that story in it. So thank you for listening, Mitchell. We got that in. And of course, in the show notes, a link to twinprotocol.ai. I have a bot there. I have just stood in front of a camera and with a suit on and talked for 90 seconds on rambling about whatever. They sent it back to me with a avatar doing it that looks just like me, sounds like my voice, but without the ums and ahs I'm prone to do. All of those. And then it was in Spanish. I don't speak Spanish. And it was in Mandarin. I definitely don't speak Mandarin. It sounded like Mandarin for what little I know. My wife speaks Spanish. She was in the room when I played it, and she goes like, "That's you speaking Spanish. How'd you do that?" So a convincing thing. And the main thing is that we've created that digital banker's box into, now we call it a digital twin, and we're putting everything we do. They made a Deepak Chopra bot and took all of his books, entered them into an AI, along with there's plenty of recordings of Deepak Chopra. And if you go to, I think it's digitaldeepak.ai or maybe just Deepak, at any rate, you go there as a Deepak Chopra fan, and you can ask Deepak a question, and it's going to answer it as well as Deepak could. Because what are the chances you're going to get a one-on-one with Deepak Chopra? You get up to about 5, and then you have to have an account to do it. But at 5, it reminds you that if you want to continue, you're going to need to be able to pay for sessions. And you do, and it's totally cheap, $10, $20, $30, something like that. Enough that nowhere near what one therapy session would be with any coach, let alone somebody as talented as Deepak Chopra.
That's a great business model.
They put all of the answers, because you're logged in with your account, all of the answers are recorded in your Twin Vault. Imagine if every form you fill out, every survey you answer, every email exchange all gets fed into a vault and then can help you with things. I think it's fantastic. I'm building twins wherever I can. I'm going to do a lot more with that one and have a public debut. That I didn't mean to get quite that carried away on this one, but again, we've got it in the series now. Actually, over on my Emerging Technologies YouTube channel, I've done several where I talk about it. And of course, we're probably going to have a series where the robot me does a better job than me, looks better on camera. He keeps his eyes open all the time, which I have a tendency not to do. No ums and ahs, and can answer your question. You may not want to ask me a question about politics or world affairs, but you can. I think a lot of that's going to go far, but the big breakthrough for me was, we talk about the 98% of people that don't have it. You're talking probably about 98% of the leaders who do have enough content that they should be able to have a digital representation of themselves, or a book, or at least a podcast or a blog or some place where they maintain information about them. And that's not 98% of the world population. That's 98% of the people who want to be leaders. And I call them SATs, speakers, authors, trainers. Anybody who's in a position of telling other people how to live. Whether we need all of those, that's a subject for a different podcast. But there's a lot of people, and that's still what percentage of the population? Content creators, they say, is less than 10% who comment or do anything. Most people just watch. The big thing for me to learn is I got the large Twitter account, that the majority of people were reading what I wrote and not ever answering me. And I go like, why? This is a conversation tool. And I finally settled down and go like, this is good. This is my audience. Let's get them to do something else. If they just occasionally say hi, that'd be good. So I try to teach them to do that. But the other 90% of the population does have interactions with these bots and the books and things like that. Geez, we could put your library into a bot. That's quite a digital. What subject wouldn't you cover?
I have done that. It's pretty powerful. Hey, to answer your question, then I got a boogie. I just GPT'd, it's the 1% rule. 1% of users actively create content. 90% of users interact with that content. 90% of users are lurkers who consume content without engaging.
Yeah, that's Jacob Nielsen's study that's over 20 years old now. I don't know how recently they've updated that. I think the advent of social media probably grew the 9% part.
I'm going to say that was the generic one, and then they went through each social media site specifically, right?
Oh, really?
So let me put into chat was the question I asked GPT, the generic GPT. What
Great.
percentage of people are lurkers and don't comment on social? And what was interesting is Facebook, 70-80%, primarily scroll. Instagram, more engagement, 50 to 60%. So it's interesting based on platform.
It's fantastic. My
Let me
producer's
share
good.
Let me share where people can reach out to me. It's very simple. I encourage you to go to the Mitchell Levy website. So it's mitchelllevy.com, mitchellevy.com. What you'll do is see the latest stuff that I'm doing. We do some interesting content. I do a clarity session. We have a referral webinar. Anyone who's interested in learning how to do a better job of creating one-on-one conversations using LinkedIn, that's something for me. For executive coaching, I work with Fortune 5,000 or Inc. 5,000 CEOs leading the future with executive abundance. And more importantly, if you want to spend time with me on the calendar, you can just go to mitchelllevy.com and book time.
There you go. It's the thing to do. I'll tell you, I've done it many times. We have worked on, I think we actually worked on something that became a book at some point. I know I'm one of the 500, and just every call with you is always enlightening, and everything for talking about old days, OGs talking about tech, to our common love of publishing and doing that for others and helping them with it. Today, you've got a system. I've retired into just doing that. Yeah, I use that R word. I'm nowhere near retired, but I've retired from helping people with their books, except for on exception. It's still, authors are still, they're a lot, especially the fiction authors I used to work with. I want to write this novel. When is it going to be done? It's almost done, means that they've got a kind of an outline. But when people really want to get it done, you've got a system that works. I tell you that having the representation where you present to the rest of the world's great. And for those of you who don't want to do that, know that in the future, all the bits and pieces of your life are going to be in a distributed blockchain, distributed what we're all about, where the AI saves the answers and interacts with you. If it's just you, fine. If it's you and a few people, how cool would it be if your great grandchildren can hook up to this thing and talk to you like you were there with them? It's going to just extend what human life is all about in so many ways. And so, yes, that is where I disagree with you. I think that the AG becoming Thanos is a possibility, but the possibility of something better coming out, very big. And by the way, if it does want to kill us all, nothing we can do about it. That die has already been cast. So let's do the best we can to get along with AI and use it to our advantage. And more important, use it to the advantage of helping everybody else on the planet. If those of us have that altruistic aim, work at that, we are going to overcome any of the negative things coming. And couldn't do it without you, Mitchell. So glad you came by.
Warren, thank you. Thanks so much for having me. Always a pleasure to chat with you.
Great. Well, I'm looking for you coming and running into me in Vegas again soon. All right.